When looking at the equivalence theory and its a part in establishing distance education in the K through 12 classrooms, we must first understand what the equivalence theory is. At the base of the theory is the idea that the experience of the traditional classroom learner versus the distance education learner both have an equal educational experience. With that said, Simonson, who came up with the idea of the equivalence theory, also defines or has a definition for distance education. His definition is this: formal institutionally based educational activities where the learner and the teacher are separated from one another and where two-way interactive telecommunication systems are used asynchronously to connect them for the sharing of video, voice, and data-based instruction. So with that said, I mean, it sounds good. It sounds like it incorporates all the parts from the traditional classroom for the distance learner. But there's three areas that need to be addressed when discussing educational experiences and being sure that all things are equal for both types of learners. And those three areas are development, implementation, and management. Think with the equivalence theory while addressing the K through 12 distance learner. As far as development goes, you need to make sure that while you're developing the program that you'll be able to cover the same scope and sequence for your distance learners that you can for your traditional classroom learners. That involves the same types of assignments, the same types of reading, the same exposure to background information, all of those things. When you're talking about implementation for distance education learners, for a for the idea of equivalence theory, you need to take into account follow-through. Follow-through as far as the student's responsibility for those assignments and things that are outlined. Part of the follow-through means that as the teacher for the distance learner, you need to give clear and concise instructions. It's very frustrating to a distance education learner if they're taking a class and for an assignment they have vague instructions. And the reason why vague instructions can be so distressing to the distance education learner is because they're not in the traditional classroom environment where they can raise their hand and ask a question. Maybe a teacher just gives an assignment, they're sitting there going over the handout, and they see something they don't understand, they raise their hand. Well, when you're at home, you're looking up instructions, you're looking up materials, and you're trying to get all your ideas together for a project, and you come across a snafu or something you don't understand, you don't have the option to raise your hand and ask a question. Yes, you can contact your professor, but we all know how that is as distance education learners. You send that question off into cyberspace via email, and then you just have to play a waiting game to wait for an answer. And as it goes, some teachers are very good about responding promptly, and then some it's waiting and waiting and waiting. So in order for all things to be equal, discussing the equivalence theory, that can be one of the things during the implementation process that need to be addressed. Also with management, part of the equivalence theory and establishing it through the K through 12 distance education program, communication I think would be the biggest part of keeping the playing field equal for traditional classroom learners versus distance education learners. I think communication is going to be the key. When you're in the traditional classroom, you have that opportunity, you have that voice, you have that audience with your teacher or instructor to ask questions, to get feedback, to discuss ideas, to discuss material. With the distance education learner, they don't necessarily have that. Although I must say I've been very impressed with the distance education classes I've had where there's so much involved with the discussion board and the threads and even some group projects that were formulated and put together, so we got to know our fellow students and peers and hear their ideas and express our ideas and get feedback. So those are the things that I thought of as far as development, implementation, and management for distance education learners in a K through 12 classroom when trying to establish that program with the equivalence theory in mind.